Good morning, everyone. This is Randy here. And I want to share with you some of my thoughts from today. As you know, when we look at the history books, we see all these great people. Right? These people are the ones we learn about in school. And depending on which country you're from, they're different people. If you are from the United States, you'd be learning about George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, Lincoln, Martin Luther King, these types of people. If you're in Canada, when I went to school, we learned about Jacques Cartier, John A. Macdonald, although his reputation has become a bit more questionable in recent years. We learned about people such as Terry Fox in more recent history. So, Canadian icons. And depending on, again, where you are and what country, in Germany, I'm sure you learn about famous historic German people. In France, you learn about famous historic French people, whether it's the Louis, different kings, Napoleon, perhaps some of the philosophers and authors, Descartes, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And in England, I'm sure you have to learn about the royalty, the different kings and queens of days past, and perhaps more, modern, relatively speaking, more modern leaders such as Winston Churchill. And then we all learn about the great artists and musicians and scientists who contribute to, or who have contributed to, humanity. Like Einstein. Right? Einstein is considered probably one of the smartest people to have ever walked the earth. We admire people like Einstein who are scientists, and more recently people like Nikola Tesla. They've seen a resurgence in reputation, and people have become very fascinated with people like Tesla. And there are many other scientists who made significant contributions, and authors, people like Shakespeare, who most people know about, if not everyone. Then artists like Picasso, of course the Renaissance artists, Michelangelo, Raphael, Leonardo, the Ninja Turtles, as I would like to say, and the list goes on. Right? We learn about these famous historic people, historically significant people, in school. And we see their posters on the wall, we see their pictures in school books, maybe even children's books. We have documentaries about them on TV. So they're seen as being very important to humanity, to us as the human race. But there's something interesting, which is that a lot of these people only became famous after they died. Right? Like Van Gogh, right? Or in Dutch, he's pronounced, and excuse me if I'm butchering this, he's pronounced Van Gogh, I believe. Someone like that, who only became famous after he died, and through the efforts of his brother Theo, who was an art collector. He became, and family members and other people in society who then really promoted his work. He became famous. And there are many examples. Some of the musicians, they were not that famous during their lifetimes. Some of them were. Like Franz Liszt, I heard, was very famous while he was alive, and he was a bit of a superstar and a bit of a rock star for his time. But others, Like I think Beethoven became more famous after he died than while he was alive. Certainly he had his following while he was alive, but I don't think he was as famous as he is now while he was alive, although I'm sure he had a following and he had fans. But he wasn't at the time considered one of the probably top three, classical musical composers in human history, right? I don't think he would have known that he would have been in the category of Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, and even Bach. A lot of his work was rediscovered later on, and Bach never left his his area. Like he lived in a particular town. I don't exactly remember where he lived, but he lived in a town that is now in Germany. But he never really left his area where he lived. But then he became really famous after people found his work years later, and he was rediscovered. So there are a lot of people who only became famous after they died. So if you think about it, sometimes you have no control over your fame, and you have no control as to whether you show up in the history books or whether people make documentaries about you. You do your work, you do what you need to do, you follow your passion, and perhaps you hope for the best. What was his name? The guy who wrote Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I think that was, F. Scott Fitzgerald. I remember everyone in grade 12 had to read Great Gatsby. That's mandatory reading. When he died, I believe he died in either the late 1920s or perhaps early 1930s, but after he wrote The Great Gatsby, he didn't live very long thereafter, relatively speaking. And when he died, he wrote that and I'm paraphrasing here, but he wrote to the effect that he had accomplished very little in his life, and he didn't view The Great Gatsby as perhaps a monumental work of American literature, and he was actually quite disappointed with himself at the time of his death, which is really interesting because 80 years later, 90 years later, 70 years later, his book, The Great Gatsby, became mandatory reading in high school. At least when I went to high school, it was mandatory reading. Maybe they changed the curriculum at this point, but it was mandatory reading for a long time. The Great Gatsby, and is considered one of the cornerstones of American literature, if not Western literature, maybe, depending on where you rank the books. But certainly there's movies about it. It's ranked quite highly, but he considered himself to have accomplished very little. So artists, authors, and composers sometimes have very poor opinion of their work. Van Gogh, or as the Dutch would say, Van Gogh, that's also a fantastic example where he sold, I think, one or two pieces in his entire life, and then committed suicide or died of mental health issues. Very tragic end to that man. Yet he kept producing, right? He kept producing more work. I had a friend who told me this once, and she was an artist, and she said, it's not your responsibility to worry about history and how people in the past will view you. It's not your responsibility, right? That's not something you need to worry about that much. Your responsibility as an artist is just to create. It's just to keep creating, to be genuine, to express, and just keep doing it. And how history views your work is sort of none of your business. And it's interesting because certain historic figures have become more favorable, or they've fallen out of favor depending on where people in the future what they believe and what society looks like. I think John A. Macdonald is a great example of that. Someone who, when I was growing up, he was considered the founder of Canada. Certainly an architect of the founding of the country of Confederation in 1867, and was always the portrait of him was always the first portrait, right, of in the textbook when we were talking about Canada, like he was the man. There was a CBC, I believe it was a television show called like The Greatest Canadian. Again, I'm just going from memory here, but I think it was called The Greatest Canadian. There was some kind of competition. It was like, who is the greatest Canadian? And there were 10 candidates. So historic individuals who were then championed and advocated by different hosts who were celebrities in their own right. And John A. Macdonald was one of them, right? He was considered historically significant. I don't think he eventually people voted for him. I think the person who won was Tommy Douglas, who was one of the architects of our public healthcare system. I think from what I remember, he won that competition. Well, obviously not him, but the person who advocated for him was successful in convincing the audience that Tommy Douglas was the greatest Canadian. But John A. Macdonald was part of that conversation. And look at him now, right? This is currently it's year 2024. That show was probably 15 years ago, the one I'm talking about. And his reputation has sank significantly. People are tearing down his statues right, left, and center across the country. They are renaming schools, right? Their John A. Macdonald schools are being renamed. Anything associated with him, and because of his involvement in the residential school system and perceived inequities that he perpetrated against Indigenous people. Like there's a lot of conversation about that right now. So because of these factors and many others, his reputation has sank, which is really interesting because 15 years ago he was considered one of the potential contenders for greatest Canadian. And across the world, someone like Vladimir Lenin, right? The architect of the Bolshevik Revolution and founder of the Soviet Union. If you look at places like Ukraine, I've been to Ukraine twice in my life. In the past, before the more current war, or before the most current war, statues of Lenin are being toppled, or they probably already have all been toppled at this point, or the vast majority, across Ukraine, because they don't want any association with the Soviet past. So they've taken down his statue. In Kiev, there is a large statue called Rodina Mat. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly, but it's a gigantic statue, the motherland statue. It's sort of Kiev's answer to the motherland statue that is now in Volgograd. There's one of a lady, a very large statue of a lady with a sword, and sort of there's one in Volgograd in Russia, and there's one in Kiev. They've made a whole bunch of these. Very different. The one in Kiev is more like upright, and the one in Volgograd, she's a bit more dynamic. She's like calling the troops and holding out her hand, and it's a very dynamic, beautiful statue. But there are these colossal statues of women that are reminiscent of sort of the Soviet version of the Statue of Liberty in that sense of how big they are and that they portray women. And Rodina Mat, the motherland statue, they used to have, she holds a sword in one hand and a shield in the other hand, and they used to have the Soviet hammer and sickle on the shield. And more recently, I think in the last couple months, they took that off. So they replaced it with the Ukrainian tezub, which is the Ukrainian national symbol. So they replaced the hammer and sickle with the tezub. And that's fallen out of favor, right? So things change. Winston Churchill's reputation was attacked for his involvement in English colonialism. I mean, he certainly was not an anti-colonialist, from what I understand. He wanted to maintain the empire, but obviously after the Second World War he could not. And there were people talking about taking down his statues in England, and a group of veterans of the war and other Winston Churchill supporters, they surrounded the statue, and they said, you can't do this. This man saved England from the Nazis. I mean, he's a war hero. He's a famous politician. But reputation changes over time, and some people fall out of favor. Some people fall into favor. So what I'm here to say is that your reputation as a historic person, whether you're a politician, a general, an artist, a scientist, a musician, whatever you are, whoever you are, it's subject to change. You could be famous one day and people could be taking down your statue the next day. You could be a nobody one day and everybody's worshiping you and talking about you the next day because the social climate has changed. And we tend to do that as humans. We tend to go into the past to find the heroes that we want to find. So I go back to the statement from my artist friend who said, you just keep doing what you're doing. And I think that applies not just to art, not just to creating paintings, but in anything that you do, just keep doing it. If you're a politician, just keep doing political stuff, right? If you're an athlete, just keep doing your sports stuff, right? If you're a musician, keep making music, because we don't know how history is going to view you. Your job is to just keep going, to do the best that you can do, to be the best version of yourself. To jump around with different analogies, Shaquille O'Neal, who is a famous basketball player, formerly famous basketball player in the National Basketball Association, NBA, in the United States, he once said, I got a lot better, and again I'm paraphrasing here, but I got a lot better when I stopped looking at the scoreboard, right? So he said that by not looking at the scoreboard, looking at the score all the time, he improved his game as a basketball player. So that's, there's wisdom here. It's just stop worrying about the score, stop worrying about what people may think of you. Just do what you need to do, and be the best version of yourself. Which brings me to my next conclusion, and that is regardless of what we're doing, who we are, where we are in history, whether you're working entry-level job, or you're in between jobs, or you're not working at all, or you're wandering around or traveling, or just in school or retired, whoever we are, wherever we are, we also just have to do what we are meant to do, or what we're passionate about, however you want to phrase it, right? Let history judge us. We just need to be the best version of ourselves, contribute as much as we can, express what we are passionate about, whatever that may be, right? Whether that's sports or music or policy or money, or being an entrepreneur, or changing the world, or saving people, or philanthropy, or creating things, or building large structures, manufacturing boats, airplanes, whatever it is. Keep doing it, keep expressing yourself, and it's not your role to make predictions as to how people in the future will view you. And I want to push that a little bit further. And this is going in a little bit of a different direction, but I truly believe that you are the hero in your own story. You are the protagonist of your story. And that there is history that is happening around you. That history is not just famous people, right? People in the past we see in these textbooks. History is you. You are part of history. You exist within history, because history is is the present and is the future. It's all of that. It's just the recording of events that have happened and interpretation of events, but it's constantly moving. It's in flux, so you're part of this flow. And subjectively, if you think about it, none of this even exists without you. You are the only person who can perceive any of it, right? If you didn't exist, in a sense, history would not exist at all, because you wouldn't be able to perceive history, or you wouldn't be able to perceive what is more popular or less popular, more significant, less significant. None of these things can even be perceived. So why not be the hero of your own book, right? And I've started to view the world from this lens, that what I'm doing right now is historically significant. What I'm doing right now is historically significant. My life is historically significant. I am historically significant. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way or an egotistical way. I mean this within the context of what I've just explained in this video, within the context of subjective reality, that you are the only person who can perceive your own reality, right? Outside of your perception, your reality, not to say objective reality ceases to exist, but your reality ceases to exist. And all of your life and your timeline exists around you, what you perceive in your actions. And you're the hero, right? You are. No one else is the hero of your story. You are your own hero. So within the context of your own history, right? So if you view yourself as a historic figure, and growing up, going to school, learning how to drive, going on your first date, getting your first job, buying your first house, your first marriage, perhaps your first divorce, right? The first death in the family, maybe a death of a loved one, the challenges you face, health scares, mental health issues, problems at work that you have to conquer, people out there trying to get you or trying to ruin your reputation or trying to challenge you or compete with you, and fighting all of that's part of your history, right? The scars that you carry, the wisdom that you've gained, that's part of your own history. All the things that you've done, all the people you've met, the relationships you've built, the mountains you climbed and those that you didn't, perhaps, your success and your failure. It's part of your own historic narrative, and the only hero in this narrative is you. And it's deeply, deeply significant. So I'm starting to view my life from that lens, that even the small things I do, even the relationships that I currently have, the environment I'm in, and in the bigger environment that I exist in, whether that's a society, that's the world, and how I interact with that has deep historic significance. So I want you to think about that, because I'm thinking about it, and I encourage you to keep doing what you are doing, whatever that is that makes you happy, that you're passionate about, that best expresses yourself as a human being, that best contributes to the world, and however you see fit. No judgment whatsoever, because there's a lot there to what we do as individuals, and we don't need to be overtly in the history books, to have documentaries written about us, to be interviewed by famous people on talk shows, to feel a sense of gravity, to feel a sense of importance, because we are, all of us, very, very important. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll talk to you next time.